Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Save Local Journalism, where we talk to four of our distinguished publishers of the Black press. Today we have Larry Smith of the Florence Community Times, the #1 African-American weekly serving Eastern South Carolina for at least 23 years. Florence is one of the major cities in South Carolina. In 1965, Florence was named an All-American City, presented by the National Civic League. The city was founded as a railroad hub and became the junction of three major railroad systems, and African Americans make up as much as 46% of Florence's population. We also have Terry Sanders of the Omaha Star. The Omaha Star is the oldest Black female founded and run newspaper in the country, and it has been Nebraska's largest African-American newspaper and the city's most effective vehicle for improving the lives of African Americans. Since 1938, the policy of the Omaha Star has been to print positive news and to be a vigilant champion for African American progress. And joining us from Texas, from Houston, Texas, at the African American News and Issues is Roy Douglas. Founded in 1996, African American News and Issues is founded to shine a spotlight on problems affecting African American communities throughout the state of Texas. They believe it is essential to identify and address challenges affecting the cultural values, principles, and ideals long cherished by many African Americans. And finally, we have Gerald Jones of the Milwaukee Courier. Besides being the city's oldest African-American newspaper, the Milwaukee Courier has earned the public's trust with over 4 decades of bringing real news and information the community can use. Good afternoon and welcome, publishers.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So let's start in the South. Actually, it's not many other places to go but South, right? Let's go to Southeast to Larry Smith. Larry, what's the latest in the Florence area, and what are you guys covering down there?
We are covering a mayoral election in South Carolina that the runoff is actually going to be tomorrow. And the biggest challenges of covering this election is the primary, an African American female won the primary, and she's running against a majority person in the runoff. And the African American leadership, traditional African American leadership, is going with the white guy.
So it makes for some interesting coverage, huh?
It makes for some very interesting coverage. It makes for some very interesting challenges, because one pastor said yesterday that there are many African American women mayors in the country, but most of them are smart.
Wow.
So that tells you what we're dealing with here.
Well, you know what? Let's go out to Southwest, I guess, in Texas. Roy Douglas. Roy, same question. What are you guys covering?
Well, one of the main things we covered this week was about Mayor Turner. He wanted to preserve the Confederate statues, and we actually, if he lost his mind. He wanted to preserve them and put them in an African American museum to begin conversation about races. So we had to really spank him real hard about that issue. Why we always have to keep preserving people's stuff instead of putting up our history?
Well, that is the question being asked in many places. Terry Sanders, Omaha Star, out in Nebraska. Same question, Terry. What are you guys covering this week? I think we're still having some technical issues with Terry Sanders. We're trying to get that straightened out. So it's on the two gentlemen, Larry Smith, Roy Douglas. Being Black business owners as well as publishers, it can't be easy right now, right? It's never easy. We had the pandemic. We still in a pandemic. What have you found to be some of the more challenging things you faced over the last couple of months? And I guess we can start with you, Larry, and Roy, you can jump in too.
Well, we've lost direct access to a lot of advertisers that we have had traditionally who pull back on their advertising commitments during this time. So that's been a major challenge. But we've actually been able to supplement that by creating relationships with local advertisers, and that's been basically our saving grace.
And same thing, Roy. How's it out in Houston with the situation with COVID-19, the pandemic? We've been in the pandemic for a few months now, and as Larry Smith just articulated, we know advertisers have been jumping ship as well. What's the story there for you?
Well, we've been dealing with broadbands since a product of the 60s. So when different major issues hit, we know how to adjust real quick to them because we've been dealing with them all our life. And by being in business, you have to have constant improvement. And one of the things that help us is we always have a bad scenario plan that we put into action before we go into business. What if everything fails? What would you do? So we have more of a proactive mode than a reactionary mode that have saved us over the years.
Yeah, and that's always important, right? To be in a more of a proactive instead of reactive mode. I want to try Terry Sanders out in Omaha again. Terry, are you with us?
I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you, Terry.
Great.
So Terry, I'm going to ask you that same question. We are in a pandemic. There's been, obviously, even before pandemic, it's always hard for African American owned newspapers to secure advertising. What's it been like for you guys over the last couple of months?
It has been hard. Many of your larger advertisers have pulled out. A lot of the performing arts, of course, their stages are dark, so we don't have them. Colleges and universities have closed, so we don't have them. But my attitude has been to pivot. And the Omaha Star has been around since 1938. And so the pivot has been to move to small businesses and neighborhood businesses and offer a rate that is very competitive, and then also offer some digital options, something that they may not have been a part of, but can be quite attractive because, as we know, many people are Googling and on the internet and on social media. So that has been my attitude for how we are going to keep afloat.
Yeah, and during these, we talk to the publishers every Monday and Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and we generally and usually take viewer questions and comments. And I'm going to just start with our president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. He says, "Salute our fellow NNPA publishers today. I am in Phoenix today for the NNPA, but wanted to pause to give a shout out to these distinguished publishers." He says, "Please register for the virtual NNPA 2020 annual convention at virtualnnpa2020.com. So yes, indeed, the convention is coming up July the 8th and 9th, and it's the first virtual convention in the 80-year history of the NNPA, and dare I say the 193-year history of the Black Press of America." Larry, we talk about the lack of advertising in the Black press in general, but as business people, I'm sure you are like others. You always have a contingency plan. What have you found to be helpful for your publication during this crisis and losing advertisers? How have you been able to make up for that?
Well, diversification, Stacy, more than anything else. Not only are we publishing an African American weekly newspaper, we're publishing a general interest magazine that we publish on a monthly basis. And we're going to those same advertisers who, in a lot of cases, refuse to advertise in the African American press, who will advertise in a general interest magazine. And so we've been able to capture a new audience there. And that has helped us tremendously.
And Larry, why don't you tell the viewers the name of the magazine?
Well, we branded the magazine with the same name as our newspaper. Our newspaper is called the Community Times newspaper, but the magazine, which is a full glossy magazine, is called the Community Times magazine. And what we do is we try to be as diverse in terms of our coverage in that magazine as we possibly can. Remember, we're always talking to the same advertisers. Whether we're talking to them about the African American newspaper or the Hispanic newspaper or whatever the newspaper, we're always talking to the same advertisers. Can we get them to come into a product that's more in line with where they're trying to go at that particular time? And that's what we tried to do with our Community Times magazine.
Yeah, Roosevelt Gist is watching. Whit Michelle says, "Good afternoon, peace and blessings, everyone." Roy, can you talk about some of the coverage that you guys may have been doing when it comes to this uprising that's been going on in the wake of the George Floyd murder?
Well, you have to understand Houston. Houston is like a checkmate city. They would not have a rush like any other city. And when Black so had the last ride, Houston decided that they never again would have another ride. And Houston is a checkmate city when it comes to Black folks. So we haven't been experiencing what others, we never have since 1917. So it's a different atmosphere. So it's the, well, I'm going live, so I have to watch what I say. So it's a different atmosphere down here. And I'm sort of the political incorrect and the outcast down here with a lot of folks, because I tell it like it is. And a lot of the other people just want to go along to get along.
Mm. Well, and Terry Sanders in Omaha. Now you operate under a slightly different structure than many other publishers. Can you talk about the structure of the Omaha Star?
Sure. The Omaha Star, started by Mildred Brown in 1938, was a newspaper, still is, but the structure that we have now in 2019, we have a nonprofit, which is the Mildred D. Brown Memorial Study Center, designed to promote journalism among students in high school, to provide scholarships, and to archive the papers contained in the past issues. And so in April of 2019, the newspaper was purchased by the Study Center, which is a 501c3. So that's a little bit different for a nonprofit to own a for-profit business. We still run the newspaper for profit, but by having that nonprofit ownership, we have the opportunity to obtain grants to support our programming. And so the Omaha Star is considered a program of the Study Center. So that's a little bit different twist. We have seen that work in other markets, and so we thought we'd try it.
Wow, it sounds interesting too. Larry Smith, I want to go back to a couple of issues that obviously in the news. I spoke to Roy about it a little bit, but also I want the publishers to also talk about the census. We know that this is also, it's an election year and it's a census year. So Larry, I guess we can start with you. You can weigh in on each of those if you like.
Well, the census is absolutely important to our community, and we are working with stakeholders across the state of South Carolina to make sure that we're getting an accurate count. The challenges of the census is it seems to be getting lost in the virus, and it seems to be getting lost in the social issues that are going on at this particular point. And so I believe that there's going to have to be something done to basically highlight the census a little bit more. And I don't know what that's going to be, because we're not going to come out of this particular situation with the challenge with the virus anytime soon. So I don't know what that can be, but there's not enough attention being paid to the grassroots level and making sure people. I got a call from someone recently that wanted me to work with them to send out direct mail to a bunch of people in one particular county, just so that they could make sure that it was filling out their census form. So there's a lot of ground floor efforts out there for the census. And we support all the work that is being done, not just by NNPA, but all the other organizations that are working towards moving the census count forward.
Yeah, and same thing, Roy. Big issues in the news, but one of the things that many say shouldn't get lost is the census. What are you guys doing in Houston about the census?
Well, what we've been doing is continually on the front page of our paper. We've been marketing the census for 2000, but we also do a strong educational piece because we found out a lot of our African Americans was afraid to give a lot of information. And we have to always go back and educate them the importance of the census and how it affects your voice. And that's what we're doing, strong education pieces to make the people feel comfortable.
And Terry, I'm gonna stick with that topic. Census important. What kind of work is the Omaha Star doing as far as the census are concerned?
Well, we continuously promote the fact that you need to send in your census, fill it out online. And I agree with Roy that education piece is most important because we are the first ones who don't want to give our information to the government. So, but without the numbers that the census provides, it cuts off services to our community. So we try to impress upon people why the census is important and to get it done.
Yeah, and so Larry Smith and with the Florence Community Times out in Florence, South Carolina. So we talked about the census. You alluded to the local election there. How important is this national election?
Well, we are a red state. That's our biggest challenge. South Carolina, and I don't know what you guys are aware, but he's raised more money than Lindsey Graham has for his campaign. All that being said, we're still a very, very red state, and so we've got to see how that balances out. I mean, Jamie is running an amazing campaign. He's getting support from across the country for his race, and we're hoping for the best in terms of this particular race. But in the last election in 2016, the last general election in 2016, there was one dot on the map in South Carolina that wasn't red. So the challenge of getting us to the polls and doing what we need to do on this particular level and getting past the division in the African American community is going to be what decides how we go in this particular case.
Yes, it's going to be interesting. I want to go to Roy and with the same thing, Roy. This national election. Oftentimes, too, Roy, when we think about the presidential election, when it's a presidential election year, we've heard from others who say, "Don't forget the down ballot." Can you talk about that, Roy?
With the election?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Texas is a red state too, and has had a lot of gerrymandering that went on here in Texas. What we've been doing even on the front page, top of our paper, has been educating people. The two most powerful things they have is their vote and their money. And they need to be very careful who they give it to. And we run that every week to empower people about your money and your vote. You need to quit giving your vote to people that don't care about you, and you need to quit giving your money to people. And it caused a lot of conversation, and we market also about that census. So we do real strong with it, but this is a very important year, especially with Blacks, that they need to really be careful and really have a strong voice in who be elected this year in the presidential and the Senate races, because we have one Senate down here that's running for the Senate against Cohen, that's Royce West. So I think there's about, 5 or 6 African-Americans running for Senate in the country. And we need to really look at them. Matter of fact, I encourage us to have them come meet with the Black press, the national Black press, and we need to just have a sit down and come to Jesus with them. Because I've been dealing with this years and years, and I found out everybody black ain't black, and we need to be careful what we're like.
Terry Sanders, you seem like you want to weigh in on that. Go right ahead. You guys can talk about this. You don't need me to ask the questions.
Well, I agree with Roy. Everybody that is brown in tone is not black. I have a little bit of a inside track, I have to admit. My daughter is the senior advisor to Joseph Biden, Vice President Biden. So I get a little bit of inside information, not much. I don't know who the vice presidential candidate will be. But that's what everybody asks. Do you know yet? No, I do not. But the one thing I do know from personal experience, your vote is the most important thing that you will have in November. And we have lost elections here locally in Omaha. People have lost elections because our community did not come out to vote because they said their vote doesn't matter. But the education to tell the fellas in the barbershop and the ladies in the beauty shop and everybody at the nail salon, your vote does matter. And you need to exercise that vote. And you need to get out and get with it.
Larry Smith of the Florence Community Times, it was your area, your jurisdiction that a conglomerate of Black newspaper publishers and the NNPA president came down back in February to sit with Joe Biden. Joe Biden, and I'm going along with what Terry Sanders of the Omaha Star and Roy Douglas of the African American Issues was saying about blackness. Joe Biden had a controversial moment a couple of weeks ago on the radio program in which he told the host that he wasn't black if he didn't support him or if he would needed more information on why he shouldn't vote for Trump. Can you speak to what Terry and Roy are saying about blackness?
Oh, I started my conversation off with that subject as we talked about local people who are not supporting a Black mayor in this particular case. So I understand clearly where we're going from this particular standpoint. I think the challenge basically is, it seems that like everybody else, everybody in our community has their own personal agendas. And they a lot of these guys, unfortunately, are just trying to get paid. And who has the most money, that's who gets the most attention. And for instance, the guy that's running for mayor, the white guy that's running for mayor in my area, basically has tried to buy everything that is not nailed down. And unfortunately, everything is selling. So the challenge becomes the Black press has to be honest and clear and make sure that message is getting out about who is the best candidate. I had a person who sent me an editorial, I think last week, and they said, I want to run this editorial, and this editorial says you shouldn't vote for somebody because they're Black. I said, I'm not running that editorial. That's not running in my newspaper. Because I want you to vote for somebody Black in this case. And I think we have to be able to stand up and take the position that we support people in our community who look like us, but not just look like us, as the others have said, but who act like us, who think like us, who believe like we believe, who support the issues that we support. There are a lot of people out there with their hands out in our community. There are a lot of people out there with their hands out in the other communities. The challenge basically is that I'm from 15, 16 years old. I've been a person who's been pro-Black, and that's who I'm going to be. I'm going to be a pro-Black person. Now, if that offends somebody, white, purple, orange, or blue, that's too bad. I'm pro-Black. My first choice is going to be the Black person. Mm-hmm. And I think the African American press, the fortunate part is the white candidate won't call me and say, I want you to support me. And you know why he won't call me? Because he knows that's not going to happen. Because I'll tell him, you don't have that kind of money. You don't have enough money to buy it. and see, because it's one thing to sell yourself. And we've seen many in our community do that. But the worst thing you can do is sell yourself cheap. The worst thing you can sell yourself for $2,000, $3,000, or for a chicken sandwich. I mean, come on.
Boy, Larry, we got to come back to you. Larry's getting aggravated, Roy.
I mean, well, I'm being honest. Can you let me add this? Let me add this to this. The black woman we're talking about becoming mayor would be the first woman in Florence to ever be mayor and the first black person to ever be mayor. Does that help you understand it better?
Wow.
So, it's a topic that really, as we see with Larry Smith of the Florence Community Times, it really is one of those topics that really starts the water cooler going and everything else going, the hot stove, however you want to put it. Roy, I'll start this round with you. It seems that every week we hear about another black man, woman, or child getting gunned down, strangled, or otherwise killed in the streets by a member of law enforcement. So it begs two questions. What do you say to your children or grandchildren or other young people in your life about what's going on today? And secondly, Roy, what can the black press do to save black lives?
Well, we did a warning on the front page for Father's Day, warning to black fathers. So we put a warning out there, and like I said, we try to educate them on why we're warning them. Because, since integration, I was living in a segregated society, and since integration, and I got a red way of showing my black. I just want y'all to know, I don't know if y'all notice it, but I'm like one of the reddest, blackest guys you ever want to meet. I have a lot of Creole accent in me from Louisiana. But we our paper that's coming out this week is dealing with the miseducation of the Negro and how the miseducation of the Negro and all these different opinions and things, and just about a lot of things I say down here in Houston. I'm about the only paper that will go left or right or really deal with it. We made a pledge January 1 that we're going to hold everybody accountable. And a lot of people let white folks do anything they want to do. They let black folks do what they want to do. And none of these things is in the interest of the black folks. I agree with Jones to a large extent. And I used to have that platform. Just because they black, I'm going to support them. And then they get in there and they try to get along with everybody. The mayor of Houston, the only black mayor I know in this country was Maynard Jackson, that turned Atlanta around and empowered a lot of black folks. The mayor of Houston put Hispanics in every key position in Houston, every key. And that is unacceptable to me just because he's black. I call him George Jefferson, like he just started moving on up since he got to City Hall. And that's an insult to us. But black folks say, oh, don't say nothing. Oh, Roy, you racist. Well, hell, let me be racist. I don't care. I'm going to hold them accountable. And that's what we need to have our paper strong about, holding anybody accountable, whether they look like us or don't look like us. And he said it too, advertising, we need to get away selling out for a penny. I went to so many meetings with publishers. They want to kiss and praise somebody for an hour, just meeting with them. Deal with why we there. Let's deal with the fact and quit kissing for $1 or a nickel. But let me be quiet. I said, go ahead. Move on.
Roy, but you don't have to be quiet on this program, Roy.
No,
just so you know.
See, I'm from Louisiana. We kind of cuss a little bit, so I'm trying to watch
it. Terry Sanders, Omaha Star.
You know what?
It's two questions again.
See, that's why we started a newspaper. We never wanted to start a newspaper. We begged the black press just to be black. Any time in the history of black folks that we need the black press, which is the only thing we really own media-wise. But everybody's telling me I'm living in the old days. History is repeating itself in real time so quick, and we don't even see it because we don't even understand our history. When someone tells me that's in the past, let bygones be bygones, forget it, they insult me because you're telling me to forget who I am and where I come from and the foundation that I stand on. And I close with that.
Terry, same two questions. Thank you, Roy. That's appreciated. What do you say to your children, grandchildren, or other young people in your life about what's going on today? And second, what can the Black press do to save Black lives?
Something that Roy said that is important. We need to educate. As I sat in our offices this weekend and really thought about it, I heard a young person, well, not real young, 30-year-old, talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the fact that that was not taught in school, which it wasn't. There are many things about our history that was not taught in school, but I made a conscious decision to feature in our paper history about Blacks in Nebraska. Now, first of all, I have a favorite saying. Yes, I'm from Omaha, and there are Black people in Nebraska, because people don't believe that. They believe it's a cornfield and a cow and a bunch of horses. Not true. But I want to educate on our rich, rich history, because if you don't know where you've been, you have no direction on where you're going. And I think many times young people do not understand what has been done in the past. I like to point out the fact that in Omaha, there was a bus boycott here before there was one in Birmingham. And many people are like, what? Yes, they would not hire Black drivers. And so it was the Omaha Council Bluffs bus line. And for 2 years, people boycotted. And it brought about a change. One of the things that I read that they did for the boycott, because I was before my time, I think that the fare was a quarter, was 25 cents. So when people did catch the bus, they paid in pennies. Well, the bus driver had to count his own fares at the end of the day. Do you think they enjoyed counting 25 pennies for every rider they had? No, they did not. And that soon and very soon changed when they put that into action. But who knew? I used that in our social media. Did you know that there was a bus boycott here before there was one in the South? People were like, really? When did that happen? So I think education is a part of it. But I also think I have young people in my family. I have adult children, and I have a male son who is certainly susceptible to what's going on right now in this country. Be careful. Tell somebody where you're going. Use your phone. Call when you're going. Call en route. Call when you get back. Because communication is the key. And the other thing is, know who you're going with. You know, you can get in the wrong crowd. Those are your homies, your buddies, whatever you want to call them. And they are out to do no good. And now here you are caught up. That's a bad situation. So know who you're going with, stay in communication, and know your surroundings. Watch what's going on around you. People tease me. I'm like, hey, I'm looking around and I speak to everybody. The one you speak to may be the one that might have robbed you, but you know, that was a nice person and she spoke to me, so we're not going to do anything. That's important. It's the basic manners that we are now lacking in our culture. I'm not going to say society, but in our culture, because many times that's how we get through, is with some of the basic things that grandmama and granddaddy exercised in order that they could be where they are today. And we've forgotten about that. So that's what I say. But the Black press, sometimes the Black press is the only voice that talks about our situation. And it is right now our situation. You know, I applaud the mayor of DC when she went through and said Black Lives Matter and ran that down the middle of the street. I can't wait to see that in person. But we have to be aggressive. And Roy and Larry, I like the things I hear you all saying, and I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive over here in Omaha, Nebraska, because we've got to bring it to point. And it's not always about the advertising dollar. You know how else, well, for our paper, the other way that money comes in is through subscriptions. So, you know, I'm not saying turn your back on advertising, But I am saying turn your face toward your subscribers and to promote subscriptions of the paper. Our paper is a little bit different. We moved to going to publish bi-weekly every 2 weeks, but I try to pack in that every 2 weeks as much information as I can about our community so that people want to read the paper. And it addresses local issues, and we've got our issues here. So, you know, don't abandon your subscribers if you are subscription based, in light of looking for advertising dollars. And you know what? If you are using the small businesses in your community, give them a rate they can pay and not the rate that's published everywhere. But if you know that Joe down the street that's fixing tires and fixing your grandma's car can afford it, give him an ad for $200 that runs for a significant amount of time. Joe will be glad to put an ad in there, and then you can be the place where Black people look to see what are the Black businesses and where should I be giving my Black dollar. I was reading how many times a dollar turned over in Tulsa before the insurrection or before the massacre, and it turned over 8 or 9 times before it left the community. Now you look at the Black dollar and it may not even turn half a turn before it flies off the street. So it is very, very important that we support Black business, give them a rate that they can afford so that they'll advertise. My goal is to have a whole page of Black business. And we have a small ad called the Business Connection, which is 1 column by 2 inches. You can get a lot of information in that small spot. And run that for a year and show that to your small businesses. And I just bet they will come online with you. And then you can go to your subscribers and say, hey, you know what? We support Black business. Here's a listing of who the Black businesses are in our community for you to support. While social media is great, there is still a place for the print media, and I refuse to abandon the print media. Yes, I believe in social media. I am the oldest millennial you will ever meet. But along with giving that rate for publishing, also give that rate and extend to that small business who may not be on social media an opportunity to advertise, and then you run a small blurb on your social media platform.
Yeah. So I want to, and thanks for that, Terry Sanders, Omaha Star. Larry Smith of the Florence Community Times. I certainly want you to respond to that same 2 questions. What do you say to your children, grandchildren, or other young people in your life about what's going on today, and what can the Black press do to save Black lives?
It's fairly simple, Stacey, and I agree with Terry on a lot of what she just said. The thing basically is I've got 2 sons, 136 and 137. And from day one, we've had the talk, we've had the understanding that they need to make sure that if they're in a crisis situation, if they're stopped by a police officer, just be cool, take the first chance you get, call your daddy, you'll take care of it. Don't try to talk your way out of it. Don't try to fight your way out of it. Even if you're wrong, get to me and I'll take care of it. I promise you, I'll take care of it. I've got a 10-year-old grandson who's a gifted student, outstanding young student. Same way, I'm having conversations with him that we need to make sure that you understand who you are. His best friends, because he goes to these kinds of schools, his best friends are little white kids. But he needs to know the difference, because that difference will show at some point in his life. That difference will show, and so he needs to know that. As far as our papers are concerned, we basically gotta be a paper that, and I agree with Terry on this especially, but we have always been the historic reference for the African American community. we've always been the place where when people want to find out things. It's so funny because when they found out about the two women from NASA, we had reported the story years before that, had we not? We are always reporting stories on people and events and programs in our community that go under the radar screen of the general media. That's what we do. And if we don't provide that historic reference for our community, what good are we as a publication? So that's where we have to be from a publishing standpoint. We have to be the voice of our community. We have to talk about the people and the events in our community. I just was looking online right before we started this event. You talk about starting the Westbury carts in Columbia, South Carolina. The exact same situation happened years before Rosa Parks. So there's a lot of places in the country where these things happen that people don't know about. And we need to be able to talk about these things in our community and not be apologetic for publishing a Black newspaper.
Yeah, John Heaston and Nelson King Sr. are watching. We want to recognize them. We know Nelson King Sr. watches us a lot. We appreciate it, Nelson. I know, Roy, you wanted to mention something also about your sons, and I certainly wanted to give you that opportunity. Go ahead, or your kids.
Well, you know, we are people that is of so many colors, and there's more of a racial pandemic going on among the Black folks with this color game. So when I have discussions with my family, I have to take them back to the different races that we were and break it down to them. I have to take them back to when my grandfather was an N and explain that to them, and then I have to take them to the next race to when my other grandpa was a Negro, and then I got to take them to when I was born. I was a colored, what was going on then, and then I got to break them down to when my daughter was born and she was Black and what was happening and what caused the change. And each time I keep changing, their eyes keep getting up. And as my grandkids, which are the lost ones, they're African Americans. And then this new generation they call others. So it's this is very serious. You just can't tell them different net, because if you come to like the Creole from Louisiana, you got a lot of them out there passing until one of them babies get born and come out a different color. But we got to break it down real to our kids. And we can't play with them, because this integration got them very confused, very confused.
Yeah, and so Terry, I want to start this off with you. In different ways, each of you have said that history has repeated itself. Do you believe, Terry, that the Black press is doing a good job of documenting today's history as it unfolds? And there's an example, of course, Ebony Magazine coverage of Emmett Till. What is the Emmett Till equivalent in today's reality?
You know what? I like Roy's analysis because I happen to be just old enough to have been all of those things in somebody's mouth. The days of Emmett Till, I think when we saw Mr. Floyd's murder recorded on a 17-year-old young lady's cell phone, that was equivalent to Emmett Till in my mind. And it shows over and over and over again. But I think that history, it's not just us protesting what is going on against us, but I think that somebody said that their grandson was gifted. And so that child goes to school with everybody. But you also have to know that everybody that's your friend in the classroom is not your friend, or their parents are not your friends when they get into general mainstream of society. So one thing about it, you will be Black until the day you die. Can't change it, can't do nothing about it. And before you ever open your mouth, before people know how diverse you might feel, before people know how Princeton or Harvard educated you are, before they know any of that, all they see is your Blackness. My daughter relayed to me a story where when she was working with another campaign and she went to the door to enter, the man told her to turn around because she couldn't come through that door. And she told me how she has experienced racism, sexism, and ageism because at the time she was like 26 years old. She couldn't possibly be in charge of anything at that age and being a Black female. Well, you know what? And she has cried many a day in her own privacy because of the things that she has experienced. But I think that it is important for the Black press to bring up the history. One of the things about the Omaha Star, the office is in a historic building. That office building used to be the home of Mrs. Mildred Brown. And during the time that we had riots in Omaha in the 60s, the Black Panthers protected that building and made sure nothing happened to it. Well, they aren't around now. So how do we get to that? And, you know, maybe people don't even realize who the Black Panthers are because, you know, their history's been just about swept up under the rug and taken out. So we have to still point to the things that are important. One of the things here in Omaha is that we have a facility, the Union of Contemporary Art, and they have a theatrical piece to their artistry. And the young lady that leads that theatrical piece always has productions that point to history. 50 years ago, there was a young lady, I think she was 14 years old, that was killed by the police. And she had written, a play had been written about that, and she showed that. And that was just before the pandemic came about. But you know what? History's repeating itself.
Right. And
And
Terry,
how tragic that was for her family. And 50 years ago,
yeah. And so are we today, Terry, the Black press today, are we
I'm sorry,
doing a
Stacey.
good, yeah, are we doing a good job of documenting today's history though? The George Floyds, the Michael Browns, the Breonna Taylors, are we doing a good job of that?
I think that we are. I think that we are eclipsed by national news. And back in the day, you didn't have CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News with reporters that were everywhere. But I think the NNPA, by them giving us some national insight and being able to republish in our own local papers what's going on, I think we are doing a good job. You know, you can always do better, but I think that we are doing a job in our community.
Yeah, yeah. Larry Smith, Florence Community Times. There's been a lot of discussion recently about the relevance and the evolution of the Black press. Can you share with us your plans for the future of the Florence Community Times?
Well, one thing is paramount, and that is that we keep it as local as possible. That our agenda and our content has to be local because, as Terry said, there is no way that we can compete with Fox News and MSNBC and CNN. And I think it's a waste of our energy and our resources to try to compete. We've got a national base through NNPA where we can get stories from a national standpoint that we can address and approach in our newspapers. But what's going to sell in our communities, what's going to be relevant in our community is that there are 30 to 40 stories that happen in the African-American community, in any African-American community, every week that fall under the radar screen of major media, whether it's the daily newspapers, whether it's the television stations, or whether it's other entities. That void is what we fill. As African American newspapers, that's what we do best. And there's not a single story that should define us, whether it's Floyd's story or whether it's any other story should define us. We do what we do every week or every 2 weeks in this case, with that to make sure that people know what's going on in their community. Who are the players? Before CNN gets to them, before everybody else gets to them, they had to come through us first. That's where they built their reputation. When you look at Sellers at CNN, he had to build his reputation in South Carolina first. His dad had to build his reputation in South Carolina. We're the person who basically introduced these people to the community. We're the people who introduce the programs to the community, and we need to continue to do that. Sometimes we've forgotten. I often laugh when I see a story in the general media that I ran 2 years ago. And I'm sure all of us have had that experience. We ran that story 2 years ago. They just got to it. But then you find people in our community who are like, wow, I didn't know that. And you're like, we ran that story 2 years ago. So it's about us being accessible to the community, making sure that our distribution works for the people in our community, whether it's through our churches or whether it's through retailers or whatever. But we ought to make sure that the distribution works. And I think my newspaper has a value. So I'm not going to undersell my newspaper. I'm not going to sell my newspaper for 25 cents a copy. I sell my newspaper for $1.50 a copy. And the reality of it is basically either you value my newspaper or you don't. But we are going to always be, I tell people this, and I've been telling people this for the 33 years that I've been in business. There's going to always be some level of the black press. If we're printing it on a mimeograph machine, it's going to be there. It can be a handout flyer to somebody, but we're going to be there because we've always been there. Now, we're going to try to compete with New York Times and the Washington Post and all of those guys. Those are billion-dollar companies. Those are billion-dollar companies. What we do best in our communities. Mm-hmm. And that's why we all have a positive reputation in our communities. We have the NNPA to draw us all together and help coordinate the things that we do, and that's a blessing. But what we do best is be black publishers in our communities, because if we're not there to tell the stories in Omaha or in Houston or in Florence, South Carolina, who in the hell is going to tell them?
That's right.
Well, NNPA, National Newspaper Publishers Association, is in its 80th year of the trade organization that represents the 200 plus African American owned newspapers and media companies around the nation. And for the first time in the 193-year history of the Black press, and the first time in the 80-year history of NNPA, there will be a virtual convention July 8th and 9th. Virtual nnpa2020.com to register for that special convention. Roy, I'm going to Roy Douglas, African American News and Issues. I'm going to go to you with the same question I asked Larry, who gave such a great answer to it. Your plans for the future of your publication, because there's been, as you know, so much discussion about the relevance of the Black press and the evolution of the Black press. What's your plans for your publications out in Houston?
Well, number one, we made a commitment just to be Black. We're going to be Black. And we feel that no one should understand or be able to penetrate our communities the way we should. We shouldn't have to go through a lot of white folks just to reach Black folks. We should know the Black community. Mm-hmm. What we're doing is that we don't care if we print a one-page paper. As long as there's powerful contents on it that African Americans read, our goal is to make sure that every part of our community, our paper is there. And that's how strong we have been. We have modified our our runs and stuff. We was out there really heavy at one time, but we've cut it down to about 90,000 copies a week. And we're pretty aggressive with it. And we're focused on where Black folks go: churches, beauty shops, funeral homes, barber shops, where they hang out under the shade trees. We've even put new boxes under the shade tree where they hang out and play domino, because we want that conversation discussed. And I've had Negroes ask me, why you got a box under the shade tree? I say, that's why we have one, for you asking me that question. She almost went Louisiana there. But we have to get in face every second, every day. That's our commitment. And for the future, we're getting on this stream of social media. I just bought me a smartphone, and it's too smart for me. But we got to get on that stream, and everybody say that's the way it's going. So we're going to play that game too. But the only thing we have is the Black press. We don't own nothing. We don't own BET. We don't own nothing. So the Black press, the jet went into Smithsonian. That's powerful. But we need to quit competing against each other. And that's one of the biggest downfalls, because when I tell different people that go out and represent the paper, the first thing that they want to do is create a division between us. Well, what about this Black paper? What about that Black paper? I say, I support them all. And then they flash the colors on me. They turn red, white, and blue. Wow, they never heard that before. So I don't say negative, nothing about any of them, but we have, and I wish they would do the same with me, which they don't. But we have to support each other. And we have, during this pandemic, we don't strive on being a 100-page paper. We copied off a Harper Weekly, which was a 2-page paper. Put something in it powerful. Put something in it to educate your people. Get it in their hands, because we found out that Black folks would take it and pass it on. Our pass-on rate is so powerful. It's there. Now, we're charging for a paper. We're a free publication. We looked at that, but we got to get the Black folks there, because we Black folks, we got to get them there, and that's that education part. You're just smiling on me, Brown, but it is serious. It's serious. That's why I don't like to talk.
No, you got.
I'm an outcast. I'm gonna just tell it like it is, and I don't care who like it or don't like it. I'm just gonna be Black about it.
No, you know what, Roy? I'm smiling because of the fact that I'm telling Norman, I'm saying, where has Roy been? We got to bring Roy back.
No, you don't. I have been there, and I've stepped back. I have been so many. The thing, like I said, I never wanted to start a newspaper, but this thing is repeating so quick, so fast. And our young kids, these new African Americans and others, don't know what's happening, but they are mad as hell, but they don't understand what's happening, because all of our history is shut off. When I went to school, after the white kids got rid of the books every 10 years, they get new books. Well, they gave them to the colored kids, and there wasn't no pages in the book. But we had teachers that challenged us. And I'm going to close on this. We got to come up with an education system for us. Everybody else have one. So if the Black press is the education system for us, let's empower the Black press to be our school until we can figure out how to get it done in school.
Well, I think Terry Sanders gave you the power to the people. Salute, Terry. You want to pick up on that?
I know that power sign, but how many people know that power sign?
Right on.
That's it. And I just want to go back to what Roy said and what Larry said. The future rests in our community. We have assimilated, and we're over here and we're over there. And, we strive to do this and do that and be in another culture. You better sit down and be where you are, because that's who's going to accept you. That is who is going to support you. In this pandemic, a lot of businesses have had to close. And in this time since Mr. Floyd, a lot of businesses have been burned out. A lot of businesses had to close. But in our neighborhoods, we will support. You know, it used to be we sold stuff out the trunk of our car. That's still a business. And you're still making money and you're still supporting your family. So what is the future of the Omaha Star? We are going to promote our community. And like Larry said, you know what, CNN and all those other bigger and more far-reaching ways of getting to people is great. But there are some people that only read the Omaha Star. They're not reading anything else. There's an older generation that they're waiting for the Star to see who's in the obits. So be it. No, I'm not going to leave the obituaries out. I'm going to make sure that I call the funeral home and get it. And so I think that if we stay true to how and why we were started, then we will do well. It's when you veer off the path, as I say, you cannot drive forward looking in the rearview mirror. You have got to focus forward. And if you focus forward, you'll go forward.
Stacey, we did a story. Roy. That young man that got killed hiking or jogging.
Yeah.
Well, we did a different spin on it. We were very sympathetic with it, but we said the Negro didn't know his place. And the parents didn't tell him his place. And he was out of his place. You don't go through no lily white community running and peeping in their windows. So this is what we got to really come forward and teach our kids. So the Black press is very powerful. I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, but
go ahead.
we got out of place.
I want to piggyback on something Roy said earlier that I think is tremendously important. The South Carolina African American press uses as our example the North Carolina African American press. And what we've done is we don't make sales calls individually to larger clients, to grocery stores, to banks, to entities like that, to even political candidates. In all cases, we sit down collectively as a group with those candidates, with those businesses, and with those organizations, and we come together. So there is no pitting one against the other because we're all in the same room at the same time. And again, this is a model that we got from the North Carolina Press Association, which has done the African American Press Association in North Carolina, which has done a tremendous job of doing that. And we've all shared some new advertisers. I bet you in the average African American newspaper in South Carolina and North Carolina, about 5 or 6 of the weekly ads in those papers are basically come from those type of relationships.
Mm-hmm. And Larry, I want to stay with you for a second. Larry Smith of the Florence Community Times in South Carolina. You know, Harriet Tubman famously proclaimed that she brought hundreds of slaves to freedom, saying, and I could have saved hundreds more if only they knew they were slaves. Is there a segment of Black folks out there that still don't realize what it means to be Black, and not just how we see us, but how others see us, Larry?
Well, I don't know whether there's a segment of that don't know that they are Black. I think it's worshiping a different God. And in a lot of cases, that God is money. And so you say, I can tell you or anybody else about the history of our community and about the issues in our community. Malcolm X said it better than anybody. When we have a problem in our community, we need to go in the back room and solve that problem. The challenge basically is that those people, most of those people in the 60s and 70s, I should say, didn't have an individual agenda. Now you've got everybody who wants to be somebody, everybody who wants to be in charge, everybody who wants to lead. You know, what's the old Dean Martin song? Too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And that's where we are in this particular standpoint.
Yeah, and I'll go to you, Roy, with that same question.
Well, it's more stronger today than was it back then.
Uh-huh.
Most of them today don't even think they Black or African American or Negroes or colored. They think since it's integrated, we all can get along. And this is creating a big problem. And I go back to the power of the black press is more powerful today. We got to educate them who they are and their history. We got this integration have really, Harriet had a heck of a thing then, but we got a heck of a situation now with these integrated Negroes. I'm not knocking integration because I remember the days when, when I had to get on the back of the bus. But this is very, very serious because of not knowing who you are. I've been writing up every black preacher I can find, and that's a whole different conversation that I don't really want to get into on these black preachers. But every time I visit one church and see a white image, I write them up. And they talking about white this and white that, and the clouds are white, and they got white angels in there, and white this. This thing is deep. And we're programmed and to feel negative. And I always, one of the biggest reference I use is the 5 doll studies that they did with little kids. How do these little babies think that they're inferior and white is right? And they 3 years old, don't even know how to walk straight yet. This thing is deep what they're doing to us mentally. It's deep. So I guess it won't happen in my lifetime, this thing.
Terry Sanders, Omaha Star.
You know what, man? Thank you for bringing up Malcolm X. Did you know Malcolm X was born in Omaha, Nebraska?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
I read on
That's it. There are people who do not acknowledge their blackness.
No.
And it's a sad state of affairs because just because the person does not internalize it and does not realize it, everybody looking at them knows they're black and treats them that way. So you can't make somebody do something. Some people are just stubborn about it, but you can keep bringing it up. And at one time or another, you're going to hit a nerve, hit a curve, and they're going to realize, you know what, they're right. And I got to get over here. So I think that we just have to stay the course. You know what, Harriet Tubman did not stop bringing people out just because there were people that didn't realize that they were in. That did not stop her from staying the course and being focused. And so right now, the black press has to be focused. And focused is like this. You're not worried about what else over here. You're doing just this right here. And if you do that, I think that we'll be fine. But we've got to focus. And I think that we do a good job of that. I know the 2 illustrious gentlemen who are on this panel with me, they seem to be on it. And I don't know who's not, but if you're not, you better get on the good foot.
To quote James Brown, right?
That's it.
And I guess we can go down, I should say, South Carolina again to Larry Smith, the Florence Community Times. Each of you are entrepreneurs. Do you believe that we are doing enough to encourage young people to go into business for themselves, to become good businessmen and women?
I think that's kind of an issue that we have to address on a personal level with young people in our community. There are a lot of them who need to have the experience to be able to go into business. A lot of times we find people who want to be entrepreneurs who haven't trained themselves yet, who haven't made themselves ready to be entrepreneurs. So the challenge basically is, of course, we need to push ownership on every level and at every time we get a chance to make sure that African Americans are working towards being owners instead of workers. And I think that's exceptionally important to our community. Are our newspapers doing that? I know my newspaper is just starting now to start to profile African American business in their community. Terry talked about a situation where she wanted to have a page of African American business. I've had one for about the last 5 years in my newspaper, and we made it affordable a long time ago to do that. The reality of it is that I want to support these businesses. I want those businesses supporting me, but we need to make sure that they are ready before they go out there. I've got some talented young men who are my kids who I've been training since they were born, but they're not quite ready to get there yet. And I need to make sure that they're ready to get there. And because one of the things we had to do, and I know I had to do because I started a newspaper almost 35 years ago with $100. So, so one of the things about getting there is there's some challenges and some hurdles that you have to overcome. And the reality of that is that everybody can't stay the course because they look at the material things around them, and especially young people. You know, my best friend's got a great car. My best friend's got a great house. Do I want to risk all of that so I can be an owner 5 years down the road? And so we've got to kind of hold their hand and walk them through the process. It's not just encouraging them through the newspaper, but it's holding their hand and walking them through the process.
Yeah, and I want to stay on that question, but before I go to Roy with that question, Larry, you mentioned the word owner a few times, and it struck a nerve with me in this sense. A couple of weeks ago, we had the Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban on the program, and he talked about a dialogue he had with Pharrell Williams about that word owner as it pertains to sports teams. He's the owner of the Dallas Mavericks. James Dolan is the owner of the New York Knicks. A lot of players, and the National Basketball Association is comprised mostly of African Americans, and you use that term owner. It's a problem to most. Is there? He asked. He was looking for an alternate word. Is there an alternate word, Larry? And again, I want to stay on that last topic, and I'm going to go to Roy with that. But since Larry brought it up, is there an alternate word, Larry?
There shouldn't be. Owner is not an ugly word. That's the first thing we got to be clear on. Owner means that I try to control my own destiny. That I have to work twice as hard as anybody who is not an owner, because that's how I succeed. But ownership means I control my own destiny. I make the decisions that I think are in the best interest of me and my family, and I should not have to apologize to anybody for that. When you're talking about a Mark Cuban or somebody along those lines, when you got a few $1 billion, you tend to want to, and George Carlin, the comedian, said it best, we want nice words. We there was this thing called shell shock in the military, and then they changed it to post-traumatic stress disorder, and it became acceptable to the community. See, we can't allow people to water down words in our community to fit their interests or their concerns. The words in our community are the words that we've used for the last 300 or 400 years in our community to address the interests and the concerns of our community. And you tell me one person in the community that you know of who has not respected an African American business owner, whether it's a funeral home, a barbershop, or a beauty shop, or whatever, or a newspaper. You tell me one person who's not respected. Doctors are owners of their businesses in most cases. Lawyers are owners of their businesses in most cases. There are a lot of things that I will apologize for, Stacy. One of them is not being an owner and using the term owner. I earned that right.
Nah.
Roy Douglas, I want to go back to the previous question. Thanks a whole lot, Larry. Are we doing enough to encourage young people to go into business for themselves, to become good businessmen and women?
I don't think so. We're up against the education system of programming the kids that they should get an academic scholarship and go work for the white folks. And that's the way they've been taught. And it's our fault because we wanted them to have a better life, but that better life didn't include us. We didn't teach them the history. We got to do a better job of marketing ourselves. Instead of trying to get people to market in our paper, we got to do a better job of marketing ourselves. And we got to get out there. And as Smith said, he's at the table. Anybody that doesn't invite you to the table, you're not included at that table. We should write them up, even if they look like us or don't. That's holding them accountable, because we let our community get away with so much. But we got to market ourselves as a good business, the black press, white, because we have Black institutions and historical colleges telling these kids that they shouldn't even look at our Black papers. They should go on to the Houston Chronicle or this. They shouldn't even consider dealing with no Black paper. We got Black folks teaching Black kids this, and we should write them up. Prairie View A&M was one. Okay, U of H is one. Texas Southern, and I name them, and I'm not ashamed to name them. I call them out in the New York Minute. And but then they always can find a Black paper that'll come to their rescue now after I slap them. But they're not going to mess with me too much, because it's like putting a monkey in a gorilla cage. You know, they're not going to mess with me too much, because they know I'm not. You know, but, y'all know what I'm talking about. But anyway, we got to do a better job of marketing. And we got to get out there in our community and let them, because we're dealing with a different challenge now. This integration, we everywhere. And we're not, when I grew up, everybody lived next door, the doctor, the lawyer, we're everywhere. So we got a heck of a challenge, but there's still serious Black pockets out there, strong Black pockets that we got to penetrate, whatever the word.
Penetrate, yeah.
We got to get into those. I can't say too many words being from Louisiana, so don't hold that against me. But we got to do a better job of letting them know who I did. The thing that I need to see NNPA do, we need to create a strong lobbying group, and let that lobby group deal with these politicians and deal with these issues. We got to know how to play that game. You know, we're doing pretty good, African American News Initiative lobbying, but just think if Terry and Smith and we all chip in $100, well, that's $300, you know, and we can be powerful, and we got the numbers. We have the numbers.
Yeah.
We need to throw them numbers out instead of individual numbers. We need to be powerful with our, we got power, don't even know we have power.
True.
So to close with that, we're up against a challenge, but we got to figure out how to go around this system, and we got to go straight to our kids, and we need to go into these nurseries and elementary schools and get our, we distribute in every kindergarten, elementary school to let them see our paper. And we got a lot of Black folks don't want our paper in there too, because it's too Black. We're too racist. Until something happened to them, and they call it, oh, everybody Black ain't Black now. It's a new day for a lot of them. So I hope I answered your question.
You absolutely did. And again, exactly. And we encourage everyone to register for the virtual NNPA conference that's coming up, virtualnnpa2020.com. And Roy, I would imagine you want to be there to share these ideas. Terry Sanders.
I don't like to go nowhere. I didn't want to be into this. And the other thing, we got to diversify our paper. We got to get our paper really strong where we don't run into pandemics and run into this and that. And we need to learn to help each other and work together. That's the problem I have with us. I have Black folks that think they've arrived, come ask me why I'm still out here with these Negroes. I say, hell, I'm one of them. What happened to you? So, you know, this is, we got a heck of a problem. Smith over there about to die.
Well, you know, Terry, we have just a few moments left, so I want to make sure I get you and the others on a couple more questions. Access to funding is a common complaint among Black business managers. Did any of the publishers here, did you receive funding from the recent PPP funds?
Yes, we did. Yeah, wow. One of the things, one of the things I think that is important is that you have a relationship with a banker. And I know you gentlemen, I'm sure y'all know your banker personally, probably invite him over for ribs.
No.
But, or Roy, in your case, catfish. But I think that many times we missed out. We go with the big banks. We don't deal with the little banks. And the little banks have money. And if your banker knows you, they will go to bat for you more than the Chases and the Wells Fargos, because obviously they supported some bigger boys and cut the little fella out. I just want to back up a little bit and talk about entrepreneurship. This paper was started by an entrepreneur, and I became publisher just this year, but I always followed Mrs. Brown, and I knew about the Omaha Star and always supported the Omaha Star. But I thought about that what do we teach our children? In our culture, there is no succession plan. Our children go to school, and whatever we were doing to get them through was enough to get them through that education, but they don't want to follow what we did. So then whatever we are doing dies from a lack of support, and there is no succession plan. So I think that one of the things we need to do is create a succession plan or talk about succession. What does that mean? A man in St. Louis owned a multi-million-dollar hotel, and none of his children wanted to go into the hotel business. Excuse me, I'll be his daughter, because you know what? You can't lose. But again, if you don't know where you've been, then you are really lost about where you're going. So I think that succession planning is one of the things that we need to institute in our culture again.
Yeah. And Larry Smith, same question.
Well, I want
PPP
to go back to Roy's statement earlier, because I think it's paramount in this conversation. What is NNPA, and what are we as individual newspapers doing to market ourselves? You see, when people think of the African American community, they don't automatically, especially people outside of our community, they don't automatically think of the African American press. And Roy, and I think Stacey, you and I have spoken on this on one or two occasions as well. Roy has a very, very valid point, and that point there is that we need to put ourselves out front, whether it's through lobbying or whether it's through advertising in major trade publications or whatever it takes to get us out there so that people recognize not only that we exist, but we have a 193-year history of being in the marketplace. And we have been the voice of the African American community, regardless of who comes along or who goes along. We've always been the voice of the African American press. We are doing ourselves a great disservice by not marketing ourselves to when you look at advertisers who read Ad Age or people who read Ad Week, Advertising Week, and they have never seen an ad in their trade publications for us. How do they know who we are? Then all of a sudden we call them out of the blue and say, we think you should advertise with us because we got 40 million advertisers. They're like, we never heard of you. And the point basically is that you can't be in marketing. And again, Roy said it best. You can't be in marketing unless you market yourself. I can market. I'm calling you and telling you to give me thousands of dollars to market your business, but I'm not marketing mine. Now, you know, financial planner called me a few years ago and he said, "Look, man, I'm a financial planner. I've known you for a long time. Let me have your financial planning." I said, "What's your wealth level?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You rich?" He said, "No, I'm trying to get there." I said, "When you get rich, call me, because then I'll know you're good at it." Okay, I'm not going. If you can't make yourself rich, how can you make me rich? And that's the case with our newspapers. If we can't make ourselves relevant, how can we make you as a client relevant? And that becomes the issue. I mean, we kind of blow that under the rug, and unfortunately, we know that NNPA over the last 6 months, the last few years, has actually had the resources to do that. And we need to literally invest in making sure that if it's in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or whatever, that there's a full page once a year, if nothing else, that lists all the African American newspapers in the country.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That's something that important that makes us relevant and make people know who we are. I'm sorry, I forgot your question. Please.
That's okay. No, Larry, that is. I think you answered a great part of it, and we're gonna let Roy Douglas take us home. Every Monday and Wednesday we do this with publishers. Actually, this coming Wednesday, we have a very special presentation. It's going to be the young people who work for the Black Press. We're going to have 4 young ones on to talk about their experiences and the future of the Black Press. Roy, suggestions, Roy, on what the Black Press needs to do to improve things for the publishers.
Well, number one, I didn't suggest taking a full page ad out of white paper. I think we should, and I hope I wasn't. I think we should do a better job of promoting ourselves and promoting each other. We should not be afraid of each other. We should promote each other. We got websites. That's very easy to do. We should promote each other's paper, and we should have a link of all of the papers on our individual website. And this would help all of us. It's not a threat, but we got to do something. The other thing that they mentioned is success without a successor is failure. You walk like a dog and you ain't got no successor where everything dies with you. The NNPA needs to step up. And they know who all is lame, crippled, and blind among their organization. They need to step up and have a fund to buy them papers or keep that name before it changed to some other race. So that NNPA is very powerful, and I believe in it. And this is the things we need to do. We need to take care of ourselves, promote ourselves, keep ourselves Black. And when a paper, don't let the paper die with the publisher. The NNP step up and own that name, and until they can figure out how they can keep it running. There's a lot of things that can go, and we all can make money. Because when you die, somebody else that successor gonna spin it. And that's what I like to close with. Let's just be Black and be for the people. Remember what our mission is to without fear of favor, we are the Black Press. Let's just be Black and deal with it and figure out a way how to penetrate our people and educate our people. That's what I close with.
I think, Roy, we're gonna have to open a show by saying let's be Black. Trade Winds says hello from London. Our national chair Karen Carter Richards says, say that, Roy. Jack Coyle wanted to know if we are interactive. We are always interactive, Jack. So anytime, any Monday, any Wednesday, anytime we're doing this, please feel free to chime in with a question, comment, or whatever it is that you like. In fact, he does say generating readership is national, maybe even an international issue. We'll tackle that the next time that we get our esteemed publishers together. Thank you so much, Roy Douglas of the African American News and Issues in Houston. I'm going to say Roy again because Roy is on my mind. Terry Sanders of the Omaha Star in Nebraska. Thank you, Terry. Larry Smith, what a job. The Florence Community Times in South Carolina. We thank our publishers. We ask that you tune in again Wednesday at 1. Also, we have our music series continues tomorrow night at 7 p.m. We have Big Daddy Kane, and then Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Ziggy Marley. So tune in, and everybody stay safe and stay well. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.